Alright, yeah, and welcome back on into some more Magic Arena. So, before I get into it, I do want to apologise for the lack of videos. I did mention it in the Singleton video, but if you're not into that kind of thing, basically the country's been through a heat wave and my computer is a little bit out of shape, to be honest. It can't really handle the heat, so I've not been able to render any videos because it just blue screens and crashes and things like that. It's really awful. So, I'm back now. The country is no longer on fire, literally. Because it was in some places. Not near me, but it was still horrendous. But yeah, hopefully I'm going to be back on with a full video schedule, daily videos and stuff like that, magic content, non-magic content, and spin-off content, we'll see. But yeah, this week we are going to be playing a lovely little infinite turns list. So, how do we take infinite turns, you might ask? Well, there's a card called Timestream Navigator, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 creature. Human, irrelevant. It has Ascend, so if we have the City's Blessing, we get to pay 2 and 2 blue to tap him, or her, sorry. Put Timestream Navigator on the bottom of its owner's library. Take an extra turn after this one. Activate this ability only if you have the City's Blessing. So if we're tapping this creature with Summoning Sickness, and it's going to the bottom of our library, how are we possibly going to make that infinite? Well, we have no creatures in this deck at all other than Timestream Navigator. So if we go over to this wonderful unplayable Planeswalker, this is Ajani Valiant Protector. And Ajani Valiant Protector is a 4 loyalty Planeswalker for 4, a green and a white. And if you look at that +1 ability right in the middle there, it says reveal cards from the top of your library. Until you reveal a creature card, you put that creature into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, if we go Ajani, tick up +1, we go through our entire deck looking for creatures, and we're guaranteed to find Timestream Navigator. So what that basically means is if we are allowed to have Timestream Navigator lose its Summoning Sickness and play that 4 mana to take an extra turn, we then tick up Ajani and we get a Timestream Navigator right from the bottom of our deck and we play it. And if we can keep doing that loop, we get infinite turns. So if we're doing that, how can we possibly win? Well, good part of this 2-card combo is that the win condition is also stuck on top of Ajani as well. Ajani's -11 says put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is your life total. That creature gains trample until the end of the turn. So this -11 can vary in value, but what it ultimately means is that we get to create a very, 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 very large Timestream Navigator. So if our life total is 20 at the time that we go to win, for example, we -11 ultimating Ajani on Timestream Navigator, which makes it a 21/21 with trample. If they've got no creatures in play and they've gained no life, we just win on the spot. Other than that, though, we can also just continue taking turns, so that 21/21 can hit again and again and again and again. Alternatively as well, we don't have to attack in with a Timestream Navigator because sometimes you need 2 Timestream Navigators to make that work. So instead, what we can do is we can use Hour of Promise, which is 4 and a green, sorcery speed, search your library for up to 2 land cards, then put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. If you control 3 or more deserts, and this is the important part, you get to put 2/2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. So in that sense, we actually get to -11 on those zombie tokens instead, and we can keep that loop going with our Timestream Navigator. We can alternatively as well ultimate Ajani on that -11 and play another Ajani, which we can then tick up to go find our Timestream Navigator. So we can continue the loop there. If we come close to milling ourselves, we do have 1 copy of Commit to Memory as well. 3 and a blue, instant speed, put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library second from the top. So if that is a counter spell for the most part. It's not literally one, but it's as good as one anyway. So we can use that to either bounce or counter a spell. The memory side of the card, though, is what we really want it for. 4 and 2 blue, sorcery speed with Aftermath, which means we cast it from our graveyard. It says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library and draws 7 cards. So this is to avoid milling ourselves, for 1, but also if our opponent has removed all 3 of our Timestream Navigators and they're in our graveyard, then it's also a way of us getting them back into the deck so that Ajani can go and grab them again. So as long as our Timestream Navigators, all 3 of them, don't get exiled in any way, we can continue to combo off, and that is literally the only way that we can win, so it's very important that that happens. To make sure that our combo happens, we're running 4 copies of Disallow, because we're in a very control-heavy format, and if you can't beat them, join them. Unfortunately, we have to play counter spells. So 1 and 2 blue for an instant speed, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. So mostly here for counter target spell, but the activated ability and triggered ability can also be relevant. Maybe if a Ravenous Chupacabra comes down, for some reason we haven't countered the creature side of it. For some reason, you would always counter the creature side, but this isn't a poor example. You could actually, the triggered ability is the enter the battlefield, so when he goes to kill your Timestream Navigator with the Chupacabra trigger, you can actually counter the triggered ability. So, bad example, but gets my point across, I would like to say. We also have 2 copies of Negate as well, because control is too heavy in this format right now, and it's absolutely obnoxious. So I'm actually mainboarding 2 Negates. I used to have 4 in the sideboard, but they ended up coming into the main board because I was just not having fun playing against control. Game 1, we probably have a little bit of a hard time against blue-white control and things like that, because they're mono no fun. We're only partially no fun. So we've got 6 copies of a full-on counter, and then another 7th over here with the commit to memory to help us push through what we need to do. Mostly, though, we are kind of built up for creature matchups. Most creature decks shouldn't stand a chance against us, because we're running 3 copies of Desert's Hold for the red decks, 2 and a white to enchant a creature. When it enters the battlefield, if you control a desert, or there is a desert card in your graveyard, you gain 3 life. So this is something to not only remove a creature in a sense, like pacify them with a secondary ability, which says that they can't attack or block, and activated abilities can't be activated, which is also relevant. But not only are we getting rid of the creature, but we're also gaining the life as well, which is negating maybe a turn or 2 of their hitting with whatever creature it is. As far as activated abilities are concerned, we can attach that to things like Hazaret, so not only can she not attack anymore, she also can't use her discard to deal damage effect. Same goes for the Scarab God as well. He can't target things in the graveyard anymore, which is kind of relevant. If you have a Timestream Navigator in your graveyard and you're up against the Scarab God deck, don't let this thing ever go into your graveyard without you having some sort of answer for it, because your blue-black player can take a couple of extra turns if they're in a very demanding position, which I would say if they're in that position already, they're going to win, but still, it's something to be aware of. Also, in terms of surviving the early game as well, we have Gift of Paradise, 4 copies of this, 2 and a green to enchant a land. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, so it's the same as the Desert's Hold. We're just gaining life in the early game, which really slows down our opponent, allows them to go really wide with their board states and things like that. But we enchant a basic land, because if you enchant a non-basic, you open it up to a Field of Ruins, so we want to put this on like a basic forest, basic island, basic plains, whatever, basically. You want to put it on a basic. And that allows that land specifically to tap to add 2 mana of any one colour, so it's just the land itself has that ability. You don't ever want to stack these on a single land. That doesn't work that way. It's just that land in particular gets to add 2 mana, so something to be aware of there. But yeah, as we're gaining life and slowing our opponent down, they're adding more creatures to the board, because we're already at 20 life and they've put down 3 creatures and hit us 4 times, and they're struggling a little bit. So what we do then, after we've done ramping, we use things like Settle the Wreckage. Settle the Wreckage is 2 and 2 white for an instant speed, exiles all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search their library for that many basic land cards, put those onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle their library. So we ramp our opponent, which is the downside. However, we also remove a lot of cards from the battlefield as well. If we're up against like red deck wins or black-red aggro, that kind of thing, we remove a lot of really tough to deal with creatures, and they're just gone. Our opponent's usually empty-handed because red decks just splooge their hand all over the board, and they end up having lots of lands, but they're stuck on top decks at that point. And when we have top decks, that's where we end up being usually in the top. We also have 3 copies of Fumigate for roughly the same kind of thing. However, this one allows us to stabilize a little bit differently. 3 and 2 white, so it's 1 mana extra. However, it does destroy all creatures, and we gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. So yet again, more life gain to play against the creature decks. It's not what they want to be doing. They want to be putting us down to a really low life total. So if we're gaining life off the Fumigates, off the Gift of Paradise, off the Desert's Holes, it becomes very difficult for them to come back from that. We have to have some really bad draws to stop us. And if they're on top decks as well, as I mentioned, we've got Cast Outs as well. 3 copies of Cast Out, which allows us to deal with any kind of permanent which might be found off the top decks. 3 and a white with flash, so it means we can cast it on our opponent's turn in response to like Chandras or Teferis or anything of that sort. Enchantments, creatures, artifacts, whatever it is. This Cast Out is a catch-all for the most part. As long as it isn't the land that you're coming up against, that's about the only thing you cannot attack with this card. But yeah, exiles a non-land permanent an opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. It also has Cycling for 1 white, which allows you to discard it if it's not a relevant card in the matchup to draw a card as well. So if we're up against a fast deck, Cast Out's not going to be too relevant, although red deck wins and black-red aggro and things like that do run Chandra, so Cast Out is still relevant in those kind of matchups. It's just you might have maybe 2 copies or even an Ixalan's Binding, which is much better than Cast Out in certain situations. 3 and a white for an enchantment. Ixalan's Binding enters the battlefield. Exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Ixalan's Binding leaves the battlefield. So it's the exact same situation as Cast Out, except for Cast Out has flash, but the upside for Binding is that your opponent can't cast spells with the same name as the exiled card. So if your opponent plays a really problematic card, you want to be using the Ixalan's Binding on that card because it stops them from ever being able to play it again unless they get rid of the Ixalan's Binding. So that's something to be aware of there. So you want to be doing that. Other than that, we've got Bounty of the Luxor. It's probably the flex card in this deck. It's not too powerful once the combo is going. In fact, once the combo is going, this card is largely irrelevant. It just speeds up the win a little bit. But in the early game, against against matchups where card advantage matters, this is pretty good. 2, a green and a blue enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all flood counters from Bounty of the Luxor. If no counters were removed this way, put a flood counter and draw a card. Otherwise, you add a colourless, a green and a blue. So the first time you play Bounty of the Luxor, it does nothing, which makes it a little bit of a bad card. But on your upkeep, you draw a card. The next turn, you add 3 mana to your mana pool, which in Timestream Navigator's sense means that it's paid for 3 of the 4 mana in that case. Or maybe your Hour of Promise has just become 3 cheaper and this is 2 mana ramp 2 cards. So it does have a lot of effects on both sides. You could also add, there is a blue enchantment as well. I think it's rare. You could also add, I cannot remember the name of it, I think it's Kamena's Awakening? Are you there? Yeah, Kamena's Awakening. Same kind of situation. However, this one is a draw cards on both sides unless you have the City's Blessing, which if you have the City's Blessing then you're kind of going for your thing anyway. But yeah, this is a flex slot. If you don't have these, it's not the end of the world, and you can add in whatever cards you want at the given time. So something to bear in mind. This will probably come out during sideboarding if it's not too great. But yeah, that's about the gist of the deck, I would say. Onto the mana base, because the mana base is a little bit interesting. So with our Hour of Promise, we get to search our library for any kind of lands. What we want to be doing is getting 3 deserts in place. So hopefully we've played at least 1 desert during the time that we've been playing before the Hour of Promise comes along. If we have, then we want to be searching for 2 deserts. Most of the time that's going to be Scavenger Grounds, which is a desert. It's colourless, however it does allow you to sacrifice a desert, exile all cards from graveyards. So we have main board graveyard hit. That's 1 desert that you usually want to be grabbing in any matchup, really. Alternatively, we have Hashep Oasis and Sheffet Dunes. It doesn't really matter too much what their secondary abilities are, because it's actually not really relevant at any given point, I wouldn't say. There might be a fringe case where Hashep Oasis, the secondary ability to give +3/+3, you might want to do that on a zombie in order to take care of a planeswalker, but for the most part, what they're here for is just to enable the desert synergy on Hour of Promise and the desert synergy on Desert's Hold, so something to be aware of. Other than that though, as soon as you've got your deserts, you want to get your Archer of Araska, because that's card advantage on a stick. It has Ascend, so once you got the City's Blessing, you can either tap 1 colourless, or you can pay 5 and tap it to draw a card, so you can draw 2 cards per turn which is similar to having yourself a bounty of the luck. So it's just going to allow you to find the pieces that you need. And we'll have a lot of mana as well, so it's a great way to sink your mana in. And we only need 1 copy because we always have a way of searching for it. We have 3 copies to go grab those, and we will be doing that. Other than that, though, we've got the Buddy Lands, I think they're called. Check lands, Buddy Lands, whatever. They enter the battlefield tapped unless you control a specific basic land. So in this case, forest or an island, forest or a plains or an island. Other than that, though, 3 plains, 3 islands, 3 forests, and that's the main deck. If we go onto the sideboard is mostly for control, because honestly it's the most obnoxious matchup to play against. We're already kind of mainboarding against creature decks. We do have a little bit extra if you need it with the Sealaways. 4 copies of Sealaway, 1 and a white. Flash enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target tap creature an opponent controls until Sealaway leaves the battlefield. I'm not entirely sold on this this sideboard, honestly, but I'm not really sure what to add in at this stage. But we've been adding in a lot of control kind of hate cards here. So Silent Gravestone is one of those. 1 mana for an artifact, says cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities. So Silent Gravestone comes in against Torrential Gearhulks, so they can't target cards in the graveyard. Also Scarab God and Liliana, the Planeswalker. All 3 of those are pretty much what the Silent Gravestone's in for blue-black control, Esper control, or even blue-white control to a certain degree as well. Also has a secondary ability as well. Pay 4, tap it, exile it, and exile all cards from all graveyards, draw a card. You want to be very careful if you use that. Be aware of how many Timestream Navigators you've got left, because you need at least 1 to win, but 2 is ideal because you need to be able to push through some counter spells and things like that. So something to be aware of, but you do get to draw a card off this Silent Gravestone. So if you draw multiples, it's not the end of the world. Other than that, 2 copies of Negate to deal with non-creature spells, Planeswalkers, counter spells, that kind of thing. Sorcerer's Spyglass to take care of Teferi because he is awful and I hate him. It allows us to look at our opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Activated abilities of sources with a chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So we can also name creatures that have activated abilities or enchantments that might have activated abilities. Anything that activates, you want to be naming. For the most part, though, you really only want to bring this against Planeswalkers. Teferi almost entirely specifically for him. 2 copies of Wizard's Retort as well. Is 1 and 2 blue to counter a target spell. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a wizard. Well, combo. Timestream Navigator is actually a human pirate wizard. So yes, not entirely irrelevant in those keywords. You can turn Wizard's Retort into a 2 mana counter spell. Something to be aware of. Maybe want the Wizard's Retorts over the Disallows, but I feel like the Disallow has those... The way to counter activated abilities and triggered abilities cannot actually be relevant in some situations, so I'm a little hesitant to put Wizard's Retorts in place, but might want to do that. I know most people, everyone in fact, has 4 copies of Disallow, so that's why I've gone with this particular card anyway. So that's going to be the deck anyway, guys. I think I've covered everything. Did I cover Search for Counter? Most of you know about Search for Counter at the moment, don't you? So it basically allows you to scry the top card of your library. If you don't like it, you put it in your graveyard. If your graveyard enters 7 or more cards, you flip it into Azcanta of the Sunken Ruin, which taps for blue, pays 3 to tap, and looks for 4 cards, and you get to reveal 1 non-creature, non-land card from among them, put it into your hand. So you might say it's pretty bad because you can't hit Timestream Navigator off of Azcanta, but we're not trying to hit Timestream Navigator, we're trying to hit Ajani, and Ajani will be hit off of the search. Also allows us to get our counter spells, our ramp, our board wipes, anything like that, so really allows us to dig quite efficiently. That's going to do it for this particular deck tech. I would say that this deck is not particularly competitive, but it sure as hell is fun, so I'm all about the fun. I don't know about you guys. We're going to take it into the competitive constructed, but I don't think it belongs there, honestly. But I like best of 3 and it's the only way that we can play it, so that's what we're going to be doing. I do hope you guys have enjoyed. If you want to see the matches, then there'll be a link right at the end of this video as well on the end card, so be sure to wait for that. While you're at it though, like, subscribe, hit that little bell icon as well, and that'll give you notifications when I release videos in the future. I do hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.